Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Chris Ryan, that's Alex Simmons, and you're watching Tell the Damn Story. We have a ton of guests today because we're going to talk about the newly released, just in time for this holiday, Scream Anthology, Fear and Loathing. Look at that cover. It's horror tales for a changed world, and everybody on this panel today is in this book. So let's say hello, and we'll start talking about how you turn trying times into inspiration and creativity. All right. Hello, everybody.
Yes.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Great to see everyone.
They all said hello. Isn't that nice? Isn't that great? It's been a great show, folks. Thank you very much.
There you go. Thanks a lot. Why don't we go around? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the legendary F Deal. F Deal, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
A little bit about myself. I have been writing since I was a child, and my two writing dreams at the age of 12 were to publish a short story in fantasy and science fiction magazine and to publish a book. And I have fulfilled all of my dreams and then some. And I'm currently writing steampunk, but most of my short stories are horror, and even my steampunk has a lot of horror. Apart from being a musician, as you can see, that's what I do.
Excellent. Teel, same question. What can you tell us about F Deal? No.
The stories I could tell you.
The story, yes. Wait, this is a family show, Teel. Teel, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a friend of the show. You've been on a lot. But for those who might be tuning in for the first time.
For many years, I was an actor stuntman, and then I decided to do something dangerous. So I've been writing. And I write in pretty much every genre: Westerns, swords and sorcery, horror. My newest book, Not Born of Woman, is a finalist for both the Seamus and the Silver Falchion Award.
Wonderful.
Best PI novel for one and best paranormal mystery for the other.
And
If you
it
like
is an
Frankenstein
excellent book.
monster as a PI in 1939 fighting Nazis, he's your guy.
Matter of fact, if you want to roll back to some past episodes, you can find a solo Teel episode when we talked in depth about that book. So very good.
Sounds like a title in and of itself. Solo Teel. Yeah.
Solo Teel.
Yes.
In 3D. Karen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Karen Renner. I am actually a professor at Northern Arizona University, and I teach classes in horror, but it's been really my whole life I've been writing creatively. That's what I've always identified as. And what else would I tell you? I guess I'm just starting to get back into the creative kind of side of things. I finished a book, an academic book about evil children in film and literature. That was fun.
Nice.
Now I'm kind of shifting my attention over to creative things. So
There you go. And we're really excited to have you in this volume.
We have to talk because there's a movie that just came to my mind when you said that. And so after we talk about what we talk about, then I want to come back to that.
all right.
Let's see if that happens, ladies and gentlemen. Now, everybody has something in this episode, in this volume, but Oliver Bear is in Fear and Loathing 4 different times.
There are 4.
Oliver,
different
tell us a
types.
little bit about yourself, Oliver.
I have to say is the brainwashing works. And other than being a multi-dimensional being in a skin suit, I don't know how you meet people do this thing, but I've been doing it for longer than it would seem possible. I've been writing for, let's see, I have to calculate the human time. I'm going to say 35
Wow.
years.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess. That's a guess.
Excellent.
And it's been, I would say, mostly poetry with some forays into essays, blogs, various other things. I also deal with theater a lot. I've helped produce theater, Broadway and off-Broadway. I've even done some radio play stuff
Excellent.
that Teel has been in. Yeah, I'm all over the place.
That's Oliver all over, ladies and gentlemen.
It's another
And
great
now-
title.
Oh yeah,
Another.
I've also done lightsaber stage combat
There
things
you
as
go.
tentacled
That's
creature.
amazing. Teel versus Oliver, a little later in the show.
Never before has a man done so much.
There you go.
And now
Well-
another friend of the show, Daemon Manx. Damon, we had a solo episode with you celebrating your amazing series called The Oceanox. Tell us a little more about yourself.
I'm Daemon Manx. I always say I'm an author with a backstory. I have 13 years in recovery. I sharpened my pen in the prison system because rarely are addicts known for making good decisions. My life was changed in the prison system when I read Something Wicked This Way Comes and Joe Hill's 20th Century Ghosts. At that point, I said, what better way to get rid of or take what you're feeling inside, put it on paper, and get it out. Right. And I found my healing process in the prison system. That's where I became a little bit better of an author. Still a long journey to go. But yeah, that's my backstory in a small nutshell. And I've been writing ever since. And I've just found a lot of healing in the written word.
Excellent. Excellent. We're glad to have you with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, when I pitched the theme for Soul Scream Anthology, Fear and Loathing, many of you had received pitches like this before. I'm a one-man band, so I can't get a slush pile. So I talk to people one-on-one. It's a private audition that they don't know about. And then I pitch. And the pitch was, in essence, current events is either angering or instilling fear in many people on all sides of the political and religious and gender and everything spectrums. And I wanted people to think about a couple of years to many years in the future. Say, if all these things that were being threatened and are now seeming to happen, what would the horror stories be like? What would attract your attention as something you want to write about? So I'd love to spend a couple of minutes and just have different people talk about how they reacted to that, because some of you had stories already and said this would fit that, and some of you created new things. So let's just free for all, just say I'll talk, and then we'll see what everyone says about. How did Alex got something to say? Help us out.
Yeah, I'm going to just say, since several of the folks on this wonderful panel have been here before, let's start with a couple of the newbies. Let's just pick it that way. And I would love to hear from Jeff or Karen.
Sure.
Either of you two.
Go ahead, F.
It seems like every Republican administration makes things worse for different reasons. And the story that I submitted for this was Poets of the Caribbean. And it actually was born back in the second Bush's administration. Women's rights were being assailed again, this whole concept of marriage between a man and a woman only, and religious oppression in that sense. And I say that as a believer. I just cannot stand that. But as an English teacher and as a reader-writer, the amount of censorship that was coming out in the Bush administration was infuriating. And pieces that I had taught in class were being snatched out of us off the lists. And this wasn't appropriate. And parents seemed to feel that. And it was just that frustration. I have always channeled frustration into my horror stories. You should see you should see some of my feminist stuff. It's pretty scary. But this one, I deliberately fought against the censorship by using some of the poetry and poets and writers that were being pulled out from my list. So there's a lot of Samuel Beckett. I love Beckett. And in fact, that was the foundation, was words, one of his sayings. So that's where that story came from.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Karen, how did you get dragged into this?
Oh man, can I say, Chris
Sure.
and I met, we were both hangry. We were both
We were
hangry. We were waiting in line for a restaurant and we just started.
At StokerCon, right?
StokerCon, yeah. And we were both, desperately hungry and started talking. Ended up being a long meal, and I didn't know it was an audition at all. So
Yeah, he's good at that. Yeah.
we were just talking about ideas, and what inspired my piece was I had a lot of students writing about Project 2025 and analyzing that I had colleagues that were thinking about, that were really afraid about what was going to happen to women. And they were talking about it's going to be The Handmaid's Tale. And I was sympathetic to that, but it also ticked me off because I was like, are you kidding me? Women are way more organized than that. And if shit goes down, I think, oh, sorry, I don't know if I can swear.
Okay.
If stuff happens, I think that I've seen a lot of my friends who are mothers, they organize elaborate carpools, they do all sorts of things. And I think if stuff happened, I think women would organize and resist as well. And I was tired of seeing a lot of post-apocalyptic movies that just took the enslavement of women as a kind of given. And I was like, I don't know how we get there, but I know the women I know are going to put up a really good fight. So that's what I wanted to channel into my story.
Usually because certain types of men were plotting those stories.
Yeah.
None of them were raised by my mother or grandmother.
Hey, but sometimes it's a given, right? Like we think about, I was just thinking the other day about a friend of mine went on a date, and what does she do? She texts me like, here's the person I'm going to meet. Here's a picture of him in case I go missing. So it's like this undercurrent that I think is a lived reality for a lot of women too, that we don't question anymore.
And just so we're clear, Karen, your story, all of this resulted in your story, History of New Bomer, Population 2,402. I personally love the population part of the title. That was really cool.
Population dwindles, yeah.
I gotta say though, as somebody who saw Alice Paul speak in college, that's how old I am. I'm with Karen 100%. We're gonna fight, just not going to go in.
Now, Oliver, you also was a first time on the show, and you were exceedingly generous to me, wanting to make sure that at least one of your pieces, to paraphrase your email, will fit the needs of the volume. Then later on, much later on, you found out that all four were in, and you actually tried to dissuade me, and I was resistant to that because there's a pronounced tone in Oliver's stuff that spread throughout, just re-energized that kind of, it's almost a dissonance, a musical dissonance, but it's literary. Can you talk to us about Sending the Four and whatever else comes to your mind related to that?
So originally, I think it was last year.
Last year at the Shade Bar,
it was last year at the Shade Bar. Chris mentioned that he had this idea for a new Soul Scream Anthology.
I don't know if it was a different one.
I don't even know.
It was going to be called Twisted back then.
Right. Yeah. I wasn't even sure when I was thinking about this, whether you mentioned it was going to be a Soul Scream Anthology. I think I said to you that I wanted to send you something to publish. And I think that's when you said, I'm thinking of this Soul Scream Anthology idea, but I haven't really firmed it up yet.
No.
I think I'm going to call it Twisted.
Right.
And I was like, I think that's perfect. Most of my, the stories I currently have, that is basically what, a lot of them have twist endings or twists in them, or helixes, depending on, but, and then I said, even some of my poetry, I said, I can think of a couple poems that would fit that as well.
Thanks, sir. How you doing?
So I picked two things. One I had, I think, recently written last year.
Yep.
And a poem that basically I thought went with it. That one that one's the one called Property of the Bugs.
Yep.
And I had just spent, last year was 2024. I spent the year before,
2023, yeah,
with 2 waves of bed bugs. In addition to that, there were other negative things, like my mother passed away in fall of 2022. I had COVID and I'm immunocompromised. Thankfully, there were mild cases, but my anxiety was a bit through the roof. And I've been looking at, so when my grandparents grew up, there was a kids book which is really more a book, shall we say, a book of manners.
Okay.
That was given to kids, called Struwwelpeter in German. In English, it's either translated as Shock-Headed Peter or Slovenly Peter. And they're basically poem stories. They're sort of fables in verse. And they're about either monstrous kids or kids that aren't. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Damon's right. One of them is called The Scissor Man.
Yeah.
And it's about what happens if you suck your thumb.
Yeah.
Or actually, I don't think it's called The Scissor Man. I think it's called Johnny Suck a Thumb or something like that. And basically, the verse is that if you keep sucking your thumb, the Scissor Man is going to come and cut off your thumbs.
So it's
Typical
an
German
up-cuddly collection.
Yes.
Why they call it the romance language.
That's
There
right.
you go. Exactly.
So you took
I took characters.
inspiration from these tales for the tales that you gave to me. We have 2 prose poems or prose-ish pieces and 2 poems that are in there.
Yeah.
Which, wow.
The poems had different inspirations, but they fit nicely into the stories. And then
and they survived the move from the idea of naming the volume Twisted to the evolution of having it reflect current events set into the future, the effects of current events. So it worked out really well. Damon, I know I came in and asked for one story and you said, check this one out. And it wound up being nailing the theme of this volume even better. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, so my story's called The Last Waltz, which is for other reasons. Get into it. It's a story of domestic violence, domestic abuse, and the story starts at the ultimate, what would usually be the end of the story. Probably the most violent part of the story takes place in the beginning. And as in abusive relationships, we often wonder, like, how did I get here? Like, how did this all started out so seemingly innocent. And of course, my main character is a female who has taken power. I have always had strong female role models in my life, so I wanted to do that. And we come into the story where she's just taken power in the most unassuming way that she would ever have to do this. And we reveal how it got to this point by taking a step back through various flashbacks that just keep progressing backwards in time to the most innocent of, that's the first time he raised his hand, but he would never do that again. And I think it worked out to be, while the rest of the story, she is propelling forward to an ultimate destination, while the flashbacks go back in the other way. It worked out to be such a good analogy as to how did we get here? How did we allow ourselves to accept this a little at a time? And that's how it's been. It's been a little at a time till we finally, this is unacceptable. And what is the culmination of that? Hopefully not the same as Nancy had to take into her hands, but that was my story. And Last Waltz being their wedding song was a waltz, which ends up being also symbolic, and there's a lot of symbolism in the story too.
And we'll get back to that. I love the story is set in a car going one way, but the mind is going back. We've all experienced that driving, and there's so much on our mind. It really worked very well. So we'll get back and talk a little bit about process and how we got to where we were. But we got to turn to Teel. Ask the same thing as I asked to everybody. I asked Teel. And the one thing that everyone should know about Teel is that...
No, don't tell that.
Okay, the other thing,
survivors
that everyone should know about Teel is that he'll say yes and come at a story from a completely unexpected angle. And he was fantastic about that here as well. Teel, can you tell us a little bit about, wait, let me see if I can get the title. right, bro. Hold on.
Do anthropoids dream of
Name
electric,
of electric chimps. Yes, there you go.
Wow.
Philip K. Dick reference there in the title, but tell us about that story and the background and all that.
One of the things since 2015, 2016, I've read extensively in the 30s, and including one of the things I got a hold of was a psychologist for the English government wrote a psychological profile of Hitler in 1939 for the government to be able to plan against him, to be able to figure out how this man thinks and what we should do. And when you read it, it predicts everything he's going to do during the war. It's astoundingly accurate. It's literally a criminal profile of this leader. And so when current events started happening in 2016, I'm like, I see this. I see what's coming. I see who this guy is. And when he won in 24, I was, I think, like many other people, paralyzed.
Yeah.
If I don't write for 3 or 4 days, there's something physically wrong with me. My body just needs to write. My soul needs to write. I'm not a very fast writer, but I'm constant. And people think I'm quick, and I'm not. I just keep doing it. And for about a month and a half, I couldn't put a word on a page. I was so soul shocked.
Yeah.
And I have a character called Cheetar, who is a transdimensional police officer, basically. He belongs to the Corporal Readjustment Alternative Police, but they prefer the acronym of Time Cops. And him and his partner travel through different alternate realities, getting things straight. And they're generally incredibly funny stories. I've only written 6 of them because they're really hard to write, because
Comedy
I really
is hard.
people laughing constantly.
Also, because you're constantly hopping from one
That too.
to the next. Yeah.
But I said to myself, I have to write something. I have to write something. And I said, the only character that I think can give me enough humor to deal with this horror is Cheetar and his partner. And so I said, what if they came into a reality where they've been in this one before, where it's all of the branches of the humankind have evolved. So we have Yetis and Sasquatch and Homo sapiens and Denovans and Gibbons that are intelligent, all living together in a society. I've done a couple of Victorian stories, Sherlock commented. And I said, what if they came into one of these where this orangutan with a bad comb over had taken over the society, forced people to wear little red fezzes that said MOST, make our state terrific. And what would that do? And then I went in the Philip K. Dick direction with there's a chip in it, and they've all been brainwashed. And there's a twist to it that I won't give because you gotta buy the book and read the story. But it was literally, I wrote it thinking I'll never be able to sell this anywhere because it's too damn spot on. It's too specific. And when he institutes the secret police, which I knew he would, which he now has, he will come looking for me. But if you can't speak truth to power, you really don't have a right to exist. So I wrote it. And then when this came along, now I'm in an anthology called Fump Truck. By the way, I have a poem in it. And so I figured they're going to get me anyway. I might as well let this out. And when you said, this is what I'm doing, I went, I actually have something that I literally figured I'd never sell anywhere. It would show up in my future collection of Cheetar stories, but I assumed no one would be nuts enough to print this. And I realize now that my mind should have immediately gone to you. You who are sitting in an Irwin Allen spaceship interior. That's it. It was literally my way to crack through the wall of grief and pain and anger with something creative. And then
Right.
I've been able to write since then. And now I realize that the simple act of creating is the biggest, greatest, most powerful thing I can do to keep fighting.
Yeah. And you were kind enough to do a rewrite for me
I
because
softened it.
yeah, because I didn't want this thing here to be a just hitting people right on the head with a huge sledgehammer. Not that yours was, but
No, mine was just a little too much on the nose. I
it was,
absolutely, that's
yeah.
why I said I figured I'd never sell it. So
The idea was this, whatever side of the spectrum you're on, these changes that are happening in this country and society and the world are going to affect you, right? No matter who you are. Some people are going to F around and find out. Some people are going to gloat and love it. Some people are going to feel terrible, suffer, and it's likely that people die as a result of some policies that are going on if they go all the way through. So the idea was to give people a vehicle to work through those immense feelings. But if some MAGA person picked this up and started reading, they might have an opposite reaction to it, but hopefully some story somewhere would give them pause to think about. So I'm not preaching anyone saying who's right, who's wrong. As you mentioned, Teel, a lot of this stuff was happening in the 30s. My friend reminded me that that we have a long history of brutal deportation. That does not let anybody off the hook. But we should be able to express ourselves. That is a cornerstone of the idea of America, the spirit of America. Alex?
There was, and I don't have her name on the tip of my tongue at the moment, but there was a Chinese actress here in the United States, very popular film star in the late 20s, early 30s. Teel probably knows who I'm thinking.
Anime Wong?
I believe so. She was popular. She was a film star, right? Went to visit her family in China and was coming back, and they gave her a hard time. They didn't want to let her back in. Unfortunately, this sort of thing happens. So, yeah, we have, and I'm sure if we keep going back, we'll just keep finding examples of this.
Yeah.
But I think what Teel said a moment ago, I just thoroughly agree that the moment you choke off your creativity, the moment you're paralyzed to that point, then they've got you. And it really is about breaking that shackle in some way, shape, or form, or picking the lock by creating, by starting to tell your story. And that begins to give you some freedom. And ultimately, whether it's published or it's put on a shelf, either way, you've at least communicated that feeling out into the world.
So this, as Alex loves to say, this is a writing show. This is a show where we talk about, Tell the Damn Story is meant to talk about our writing process to make it easier for emerging writers to go through their process and come up with viable works. So if we can, and anybody can start this, can we talk a little bit about how you turn anguish at a news item or a social media post or a political policy or what have you into a creative work? How does it go from what the hell to something you can be satisfied with?
Just to tag on what I said is that with mine, I found the characters I knew were humorous. They're basically Hope and Crosby, one of them hairy and short. And they all the stories are kind of road pictures. And that allowed me to have them make comments on this dark world, because I think if I had gone for a straight horror story that wasn't, that's why I did the Philip K. Dick riff in the title, because I was basically telling you this is going to be coming at it from a bizarre angle. This is going to be strange. If I had done straight horror, I think it might have consumed me. I was so broken in my disappointment of my fellow humans that they allowed this to happen, that I had to laugh. That's Mel Brooks' thing, is Nazis don't like to be laughed at, which is they can't handle humor.
Yeah.
And that gave me permission to say the things I wanted to say and not be swallowed by them. And like I said, because they were familiar characters, it helped. It was really hard to write. Like I said, it was starting after a full month of a dead stop to be able to, it's like picking at a scab. You got to get it off, but it was really hard. But I knew I needed to do it because otherwise I would cease to exist as a creative being.
If I could jump to Professor Renner with the same question. Now,
Oh,
Professor,
Prof.
again, there was some rewriting involved with yours as
Yeah.
well, but that last version that came just really sang. Is there something you can talk to us about that rewrite? What do you think happened with that?
I don't know. The hardest part of that story was to express a kind of female rage at being the subject of violence for a long time, but not. But I guess I had to ask myself the question about if you retaliate with violence, aren't you going to then end up in the same place
Right.
that the other group began in?
Do
So
not
I
become
think,
the monster
yeah,
to
if
defeat the monster.
can anything positive come out of violence? I think in the several drafts that I went through with Chris, I think I was a little bit too worried about how it would be taken. And I think what I had to do is realize that the people, men, women, all in between, everyone, I think the right people will read the story in the right way. And I think the wrong people are not going to get it, but they weren't going to get it anyway, no matter how I wrote it. So I think actually I was trying to be a little bit too, I don't want to say too inclusive because that sounds ridiculous considering I want to be very inclusive, but I was too worried about being polite, maybe. And I think pulling that back a little bit and just thinking I'm writing for the people who will understand it or who will go into this with an open mind because I'm not going to reach anyone else. I think that was one of the things that I was
Excellent.
thinking about.
Thank you. Damon, you wrote from a female perspective. Can you talk about challenges and revelations from that process?
Yeah, I usually don't. I put myself in other situations before, but I generally, you don't go where typically the point of view is just from a female character. But I didn't find it all that difficult. Was raised by my mom. I have one sister. I don't have brothers. Well, I have a father, but it was a weird relationship and it still is. And I witnessed my mother go through a divorce, and I've been a mama's boy my whole life, and I'm proud to say that in the best way, because my mom was like, she was my rock throughout my life, like my biggest supporter. I just really try to put myself through empathy and through what I've observed to write from that point of view, which as a man, how can I get it right? But I tried to do my best and do what I could.
Speaking as also a male who was raised by his mom, I also identify with that, Damon. It's pathetic that we even have to comment about mama's boy. It's your daddy's boy, your daddy's son. That's a whole thing. But the mama's boy. But the reality, a lot of strong women saved a lot of young men.
It's true. It's very
Straight up. So you don't back off of that. And the other thing I would say is, Chris and I say this a lot, we can write about what we haven't lived to the best of our ability, and starting by doing our homework and trying to be respectful of that. But obviously there's going to be something we're going to leave out. But Chris, for instance, constantly runs his material by people who live that particular life or that type of character experience to get their feedback. And I think you were true to that too. I remember when you were on the show before. So I think, again, we can only do what we can do, and as long as we keep doing that, we have a shot.
Yeah. F, you in recent communication with me, you mentioned Poets of the Caribbean as your prose poem, and it lit me up because one of the aspects of Poets of the Caribbean is There's a distinct story. There is definitely oppression in there. There's definitely just horrific elements, but also there's just this wonderful expression of the power of creativity and also the handoff from one creative to the next. Can you talk about that a little bit? And then we'll all have a parade for the arrival of the one and only Steven Van Patten.
SVP.
There he is, yes.
Hi,
It's
Steve.
gonna be a parade. But if you could tell us a little bit about that, Eb.
Words are power, and the more eloquently you can put them together, the more force it's going to have. And if you can I always look for words that have double, triple, quadruple meanings to spin around. There's a play on the word hurts. There's a play on the word sees. There's a lot of, I'll pick you up on this word and then shift it back over to its other meaning and carry it that way. So that in that one section where the voice is speaking within his head, it just flows along. It's not a speech, it's not a diatribe, it's a stream that you have to follow. And all of the rocks that stream tumbles over are the words that have the power for him.
Yeah.
And they carry him through to the end, and when he realizes whose voice it is.
It's, as so many of these stories are, it's not only a captivating, engaging story, but also it's a great exercise to read again, like a second or third time, and say, all right, how'd she achieve that? And I've done that with so many stuff. That's one of the things I'm so thrilled about this particular volume of Soul Scream, is that there's so much you can get the story, get the subtext to help heal your soul. But as writer, you can go back and say, how did that happen?
If I can
Yes,
just
please.
spin on that, because as a teacher, I did this. I had kids and I'd say, what's a specific feeling you want to convey? And now I want you to write down every word that you associate with all that feeling, and then try to match words with one another. Where do they go? Here are words that are colors. Here are
Right.
words that are verbs. And what are the sounds of those words? And what are some of the synonyms that you could use instead? For example, the sun is coming up. Is it rising or is it dawning?
Right.
And it has the potential to springboard into another word for meaning.
And learning the nuance, the strength of nuance is really powerful in storytelling. Thank you. Although we're going to get back to you in a second. It's parade time, if everyone can. There we go. Ladies
Not
and
happening.
gentlemen, a man of words, a man of so many words that he wears them on his clothes. FAFO, there you are. But coming to us literally out of vacation land there.
No, I was not on vacation. No,
Oh, you were
sir.
working? You were
No,
working?
I was working the 4th of July concert, fireworks, whatever the
Oh,
hell
wow.
in
God
Philly.
bless you.
I'm literally just getting off an Amtrak train.
God bless, right off Amtrak. God bless him. He's coming up from parts unknown, or parts we're not going to tell you about, to take care of this and stopping by here to talk to us about one of the more grounded and personally for me controversial. I thank God, I have to thank Stephen for his excessive grace with me, because I kept going back and saying, can we do this? Can we do that? Not because anything was wrong with the story. Everything was right with the story.
Thank
But
you.
I didn't want to be sued by a particular community. I didn't want, there's some words, Alex will back me up. There are certain words that I've debated with him. I try never to use in print, and God bless you, Steve, for understanding that with me. But let's talk about Jim Crow 2028, set in Brooklyn of the not too near future. What can you tell us about your writing process, the reason why this was the story when I came with the pitch that you said, oh, I'm going to do this one, or I'm going to touch up this one and send it in? Why this one, and what do you want to say about it?
You know what? First of all, thanks for having me, everybody. Sorry I'm late. And so Jim Crow 2028, I don't know if I was being psychic. I don't know what the hell was happening, but that it came from a space of, this was written after the 2016 election, and I was just in a space of, what if this continues? Then everything that we've built, or let's say even thought we had as a people, is very much jeopardized. And I named it Jim Crow 2028 because it's basically about a young pizza delivery kid who, and if it hadn't been for the whole Biden thing, because again, I'm playing with an alternate universe kind of thing in my head. If it's 2028 and he's 16, then all he's known is Republican oppression. And here he is, he's literally just trying to deliver pizzas and ends up in this whole thing. And I'm not going to give the whole story away. He ends up in this whole thing where he's being chased by these cops who are doing these awful things to homeless people. It's only by the fact that he literally runs into a rescue team that he even survives the story. It was really my whole way of just kind of like addressing how even what we think we had or have or whatever, it can just go away. And unfortunately, we're seeing even more and more of that over the past 6-7 months. And I'm in a place right now where I wrote the story, but I wrote the story as a cautionary tale. But as many people who write horror and science fiction that has some sort of social message behind it, we don't necessarily want to be right. We want you to listen to us the first time. That kind of doesn't seem where we're headed right now. That's basically what inspired the story in the first place, and that's basically where I'm at.
Yeah, and I thought, and we'll go to Oliver on this. I thought one of the functions of Fear and Loathing might be to help people who are struggling currently find a way to continue, find a way. Oh, one of the things that all of your stories, there are 16 different authors in here, plus the legendary Soul Scream staff, which is a topic for another issue, another episode, and 3 different artists to put all this together. And one of the things that was a gift to me in going through this was, again and again, I would read a story and part of me would say, I'm not alone. There's so many things going on that you start thinking, am I the crazy one? And I wanted to try and offer a vehicle where people can open this up and find another person so they don't feel as alone. Now, Oliver, you again appear here 4 different times in this volume because you gave each time a pure, dissonant reminder that we are in a horror publication. And yet it still resonated with Fear and Loathing. You're adventurous with me where you're like, okay, yeah, if you need to adjust something, sure. What was your experience of finding out that all 4 would be in this and create a through line for this volume?
I think not as severe as Teel, but I think shock was a good explanation. The second, I call them the second 2, but so the poem and the story I sent to you more recently wasn't as much of a shock because that was a story, the story, The Eldritch Heart. And that was a story that I originally wrote. I surprised myself because I wrote that in an afternoon. And I wrote that for the Shade Bar reading on Valentine's Day. And the reason I did that was because I had said to Jim and Carol, I could read these things or I could read something new. I'm thinking of something and perhaps I'll read something new. And I woke up that morning and went, holy crap, I don't have anything. But that particular version of that story had been coalescing in my head. It actually started coalescing with this poem that I wrote, which I'm not sure I sent you, but which was like, I think it starts saw blade wings whirring.
Yeah, it's not in here,
but so I was trying to write that particular poem, and this story kept intruding. So I was like, I don't want to write that story. I'm trying to write a poem. And I think I was trying to write that poem specifically for something. I don't remember what it was now, but
I love when a story insists or a piece insists on being born. And I also love the lesson you're giving us that nothing helps creativity like a really close deadline.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
number of people have said that. Yeah, so I wrote that story, and one of the problems I had in writing that story for the reading
Yes.
was that Carol Geisander, the host of the reading, knows, I guess, the style I like to do
Right.
of stories, and she's, could you tone it down for the majority, for like our reading audience? And I was like, oh, okay.
So the
the
Eldritch
story,
Heart is to be looked at as Alva Bear light. Is that what we're talking
well,
about?
no, not the version you have.
There you go. Ladies and gents.
Yeah.
The version you have is a different version that I read at the reading. And then I had said to you before I read it that evening, you're like, if you like this piece, you can have it for, I still called it Twisted. For Twisted,
Right.
because I think the previous piece I sent you isn't exactly along the lines
Right.
of the theme that you want. And I
Yeah.
think this may be a little bit better. And you didn't say anything to me
Well,
at the reading. So then I emailed you later.
I was still digesting everything.
Yeah. So I
I-
emailed you later, and then I was like, now I have to really rewrite this story again, because
Well,
not only do I want to make the end different, but
right.
I want to make it fit Chris's
Well,
theme specifically. So
it fit fantastic. And I want to take a minute here, and then I'm going to turn to Alex for the next question. But one of the things that having you in the volume 4 times, one of the things that allowed us to do, every creative piece gets an author interview. And this allowed me to have all 4 of our staff members write the interviews on you. And what I wanted to do there was, they're all very different personalities, and I wanted to bring to bear the 4 different personalities so they each saw you in a slightly different sense, because one of the subtexts there is that, listen, right now we're not accepting that there's different points of view. Everything is us or die. And if someone were to read all 4 interviews, they would see 4 different Olivers. And right now we have so many different Americas. The America that oppressed women are feeling, or hunted migrants are feeling, or the rich elite are feeling, or the working class are feeling, or the farmers who have lost their staff and their subsidies, or the political America. I could keep going on for 400 different African Americans are in a very different sphere here, because they're like, we've been fighting for this longest time. If we come in, that's what they want. So it's this, so many different people are feeling like they are finally getting revenge on one side, or are walking in a minefield, or about to be trapped on another one. That's not America. And and your interviews allowed one more level of experiencing that. So many things showed up. ICE showed up, oppression of women, racial oppression, sexual oppression. It just goes on, just like America. And hopefully that experiment worked. We'll see. But let's turn to
but
Alex.
I was just going to add one thing
Okay.
more,
And then
which was the other reason I was surprised. I guess I was glad that you took the Eldritch Heart, is because I guess I was concerned at the end of that story that the way I portrayed the woman at the end of that story was was probably more in line of oppression of women than I thought it should be, but you still took it. So there you go.
Well, again, we're trying to present multifaceted points of view, and that has to include the villain. It's part of the conversation. Plus, it was Alva Bear. Teel.
I was just going to say, I heard the original version of Jim Crow 2028.
Yeah.
And it's one of those stories that just stayed with me for a long time. And as I said, I spent a lot of time studying the 30s. The Nazis came to America and based their eugenics laws on our Jim Crow laws.
Yeah.
They came here to study how to oppress the Jews because we had been doing such a good job with oppressing Africans.
American excellence.
Yeah, we're number one. And
Or number two, depending on how you want to look at that.
Hey, yo.
but so when I heard the original version of the story, I was like, yeah, this is it. And I've been as terrified as him since 2015 because I could see it coming too. And damn you for being right, you and Orwell.
I have to wonder if we couldn't have put in, I haven't read the collection yet, but as I see a horror story, I see someone, some maggot who is in a situation where he's actually the protagonist and he's frightened by, Hispanics rising up or women who fight back. And there's a horror story right there, but
That's pretty much right-wing media.
it's, yeah. Yay, we won.
Watch Fox News, man.
No, I can't. I can't.
Yeah.
I get sick. I get sick.
We'll be back with the autobiography of Dylan Roof.
Yeah.
These messages.
Damn.
Yeah.
Alex,
Yes, I'm here.
share some wisdom. Ask a question. Let's see what you got.
Actually, I've been thinking about a number of things here as I'm listening to this. And when I work with some of my students, my writing students, in particular, young screenwriting students, and from different countries, which is truly stimulating for me because you get the multicultural experiences and exposure. But I'm looking at how some of them are reacting emotionally to what's going on. Some of them who are here from their other country, hoping they can stay and study, not knowing what's going to go down one way or the other. And so they're trying to be normal, have a normal school day, a normal life, and focus on their art while all this is going on around them. And sometimes they internalize so much that it starts to emotionally overwhelm them because they're trying to deny what they are obviously really feeling because they don't really know if they can express it to anybody. And here you are, all of you, having this opportunity to express. And Teel mentioned that the shock of what happened hit him so hard that it locked him off for a month. And I'm just wondering, how did you feel writing the story, and how did you feel after you wrote the story? And do you still feel that way? Because our feelings, our emotions, our experiences absolutely are funnels or filters that affect our artistry. And I'm just curious, how do you feel? How did you feel? How do you feel now?
Is that for everybody?
That's for anybody who
Yeah.
wants to jump
Well,
on that.
we haven't heard from Damon and Karen and then F for a while. So Damon, can you start? Then we'll go to Karen. Then we'll go to Steve. Then we'll go to F and go on from that.
Yeah, so you know what? I'm messed up lately, and I'm not the only one. I am really fortunate that I wrote this story like years ago and just had some minor changes to add to it and that it worked, but I haven't been able to manifest a word in over a month. I am like, so my father is 86. He needs a heart valve replacement. He's on Medicare, and I'm really scared of what his future holds. We're about to get his heart valve replaced. My sister was born with cerebral palsy. She's just 2 years younger than me, and she's on Medicaid. And yeah, I'm 5 years out of the prison system, and the jobs that I can get are like, I cannot afford to take care of everybody. So I'd like to be the man of this situation and muscle through, but I'm really internalizing things. I have not been able to push past that thing. And I'm hoping that I can, because
You will.
I've started so many stories. I have a novel that's 70,000 words already. I just can't finish it because I'm internalizing so much. And so I'm probably the other side of the spectrum here. No, I haven't been able to push through it to get it because I'm really like, and I'm not the only one, because You look at my demographic, look at me, I'm a white man who in his 50s, I'm probably going to be okay, which that sucks for me to be able to say that
Yeah,
because that's a lot of people who are not going to be okay.
that's pretty much how I feel. Is I'm in theory the last ones they'll be coming for because I'm a white cis guy. But the fact is, most of the people I love don't fit that description. And I have a daughter, and I'm on Medicare. I would be dead and crippled if it were not for Obamacare, ACA. And like I said, the way I got through it was finally I said, these characters are funny. And because they are funny, I can put them in this horrible world and I can poke fun at the thing that I hate, that I'm terrified of. You're a hell of a writer, Damon. And I think
Thank you.
if you found some way to literally be on the nose with it, even if it's too on the nose the first draft, it would cut through it. Because that's what happened to me. It's so on the nose, I didn't think I'd ever be able to sell it.
It's power of rewrite, though. Power of
Yeah.
rewrite. Yeah.
But that's the thing is that because I realized I was going to drown if I couldn't find a word to hang on to and then another word and another word. So I think even if you write the stupidest thing you can think of, or the silliest thing, or complete anything.
Write a musical.
Yeah, write a musical, honestly.
Absolutely.
Look at that. Look at that. See that? Yep.
Hitler on Ice.
Yep. But who else did you want to?
Karen and Steven, and then we'll go to F and Oliver.
F, you want to go? I'm still processing the question, I'm thinking.
And this is coming off of what Damon has brought up. In 2016, actually in 2015, when it began, I was really roiled mostly because the man had bankrupted a friend of mine. He'd lost his business at the age of 52 from working on the Great Gold Tower. One of my seniors, for her project, research project, was working with a women's shelter and found two of my former students who had been raped by the man. Talk about breaking down. I did not write a word from 2016. I did not write a story or a poem from 2016 until 2020. And I got madder and madder as 500,000 people died from stupidity. But what I did do was what I was mentioning before, and that is take what I was feeling and write words I associated with it, write questions that I had, sentences that would just pop out of me if it became the basis of a, what do Rosie the robot, Siri, Alexa, and the Starship Enterprise's computer have in common?
I can't find any TVs to open apps nearby.
Yep. They are women, and they are women who know all the answers and get everything right. And yet we're the ones who are the servants. So questions like that began. 2020 came, and here's what comes of that. I wrote 3 full novels. I wrote my first novel in 4 weeks, the second novel in 6 weeks, and the third novel in 3 months. I had to do more research for that one. Boom, it just poured out because I did not stop thinking. I did not stop fighting. I just stopped putting together narratives and art. But your process is the healing. That's where the healing takes place, is in the process. Some people process by writing. I process before writing. And out of it came, I wrote a foreword to an anthology called Incubate from Speculation Publications, and I highly recommend that reading. It's a woman's rage after Dobbs v. whoever. The second thing that came out of it was after that intro, I was invited to submit to a Grim Retold anthology. And I took Fitcher's Chicks. And I got from that a story that I had not been able to tell for over 55 years about being molested by a man who was highly respected in a community. And everybody told me it's done and over with, he's dead. And that was the response. I don't know how many of you are Teel, you might understand the thinking of the 60s, where you keep your mouth shut, don't tell anybody. I confronted my priest obliquely, and he said, when you're ready to come back into the church and forgive, we'll gladly take you back. Same thing I said to my mother. I have a friend who, she said she must have deserved it. So 55 years of rage, but through it, I was not able to tell the story, but I sure was able to write my feelings about it, my questions about it. And when I got to Fisher's Birds, I don't know if you know the fairy tale, but Fisher marries the first daughter, says, don't do this, and she does it, so he chops her into pieces. Then he goes back and marries the second daughter. The third daughter catches on, and she heals the others. And that idea of chopping somebody to bits was exactly how I had felt. It's exactly what I wanted to do. So I was able to take that story and tell. And I will confess, I am still gathering thoughts over 2024. Yes, I'm stunned, but now I know how to get through it. That's how I get through it.
Why don't we go with Steve and then we'll go back to Karen. Steven Van Patten.
So in terms of processing, by the way, Damon F, Jesus Christ, I'm so sorry. But it's the funny thing about me is before 2016, I think mentally I was in another place. I had recognized that African Americans had gone through hell and high water just to survive this country and everything. But I honestly had been one of those people that were I slid into this mentality that we were going to be all right. It was thanks to, you got Cosby Show and Living Single and all this good stuff. And in my neighborhood, you want to talk melting pot. We're out playing football and everything. And it's every shade under the sun. White kids, black kids, Filipino kids. And that diversity had already enriched my life to the point where, yes, I knew if I went down south and said the wrong thing to the wrong person, it was going to turn into, oh, so you're one of them uppity city N-words. And I knew to take precautions that way. But 2016, I literally went to Junior's and had a steak because on election day, because I was like, hey, we're going to have a lady president. That's going to be awesome. Let me eat the steak real quick. And then, ironically enough, I was stage managing the BET election special that night.
Wow.
So I got to see up close and personal in real time the pre-demise of democracy, so to speak. BET went off air without even really announcing a winner. I'm getting all these text messages from my friends at The View talking about how drunk Joy Behar has gotten. It's just a wild, messed up night. And all I did was like bar hop, talk to strange women, and then collapse at home, wake up and be like, please let that have been a nightmare. And no, the nightmare is real. So here we are. And as far as my creative process is gone, I got my ups and downs pretty much like everything else. But I have been able to write quite a bit, actually. That's the good thing. The bad thing is I actually don't have as much time as I'd like because I'm also worried about what's next. And I'm so worried about what's next that for my other life, anytime somebody has a show, but sure, I'll be right there because now you're like more conscious of chasing money and all this other stuff. And then, of course, again, if I leave town, then I'm looking over my shoulder a little more. So all of these extra stressors, but then again, you almost have to look at it as, hey, right, when we go through stuff as a community, that's where the blues came from, right? That's where socially conscious rap, before the record labels destroyed that, more or less, that's where that came from. And I try to live in that space as much as I can. I was always doing quote unquote socially conscious horror, but now I almost feel even more activated, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's where I'm at
Absolutely.
until they deport me to Alcatraz anyway.
Let's hope
I'll be
not,
right there
man.
with you, bro.
I know, right?
I don't want to be deported anywhere.
Karen?
I can't even start on that.
Yeah. Karen.
The absurdity. Karen.
It's interesting how where this has ended up, because I'm actually not a US citizen. So I was born in England, and
Oh, you're okay.
I was only born in England because we happen to be living there. My dad's German and my mom's Australian, and I
Oh,
grew
wow.
up mostly overseas. And in the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to go visit both Germany and Australia. And what I think one of the things I'm really realizing, especially because I'm thinking about the publication of the story, I sent it to my brother who's in Australia, right? My brother who mocks, complains about everything that's going on in this country. And then I was like, but wait a minute. A lot of the things you're saying sound a lot like the same kind of problems. So you may have a party that you're making fun of, but the stuff I hear coming out of your mouth is actually the same kind of stuff that allows someone like that to be elected. Yeah, I've been thinking about a lot about that. And then the person I feel like is most politically on my side, my father, was born in East Germany, had to flee East Germany during the war to West Germany. So he's got an entirely different view on it and much more aligned with my politics. So it's interesting to see what's going on here within a global context too, and to realize that you may not have elected a certain person, but things are going on in other countries that are also very similar. So I was thinking a lot about that.
It's funny. My friend, a dear friend for almost 30 years, is in town this week. He's from England,
Uh-huh.
and his lady is from Australia.
Ah.
I was just spending the evening with him the other day. So I was hearing a lot of that. And now to hear you say that, I'm going, okay, the universe is talking to me in some way, shape, or form. But I hear you. I definitely hear you.
Yeah, I think I've found out, not that she's ever said anything to me, but when I was in Australia, someone mentioned Trump and I said what you would say in that situation. And then someone said, oh, your mom loves Trump. And I was just like, what? You don't vote for the man, but you love him. I don't even know what that means. So anyway, but I was also thinking a lot about what F said, and I think this probably relates more to my experience, my emotional experience is I never felt so much rage except after the 2024 election. I stayed up the entire night. I wrote a really angry piece that I then was like sending out in kind of a insomniatic rage. But that's the first time that I actually felt rage against a man that I didn't know. So I pulled into campus and there was a white young, I'm sure he was perfectly lovely, walking in front of me, and I felt like I just want to gun the engine just to like not to hit him, but just to hear.
Get a
And then
rise out of him. Yeah.
and I was
Some
so
power.
horrified by myself. But I realized too that I think I want to lean in a little bit more to the anger and find ways to express it, because
Right.
I think that women have been really polite for a long time and we haven't said things or expressed rage in return.
I do think it's important that we find ways to do that, because
Yeah.
I think there's a certain segment of the population that is hungering for a civil war, is hungering for violence. And I think the worst thing we can do is give it to them.
Yeah.
I keep seeing people murmur about national strike, about inundating and just a deluge of phone calls and emails and letters to representatives. What they would do at this point, I don't know. Boycotting big companies that are supporting. There's a million things, none of which
Change of
quite quells the violence and the frustration in our hearts, because we understand and were raised with the idea of America, the dream of America, the promise of America. And I understand that for an enormous chunk of the actual citizens of America, those three things have not been fulfilled. But they have led us to inspiration. They have led us to certain progress that is not being thwarted. and it would be like jumping on a landmine to give in, to fall into the trap of exactly what they want, which is an excuse to send the troops in, an excuse to slam heads. It's a very difficult time in our country.
He
And I'm
doesn't need an
hoping that
excuse. Sorry.
he's going to manufacture one. He's already done it in California. He's already done it in other places.
I look back at the ridiculous BLM protest, and he comes marching out with his troops throwing tear gas and holding up a Bible upside down, saying,
Yeah.
And
One
Yes.
of Hitler's justifications for invading Poland was he sent a couple of his SS guys in, actually at that point they're the SA, dressed them in Polish officer uniforms and had them attack a German language radio station in Poland and then killed them so that their bodies were left in Polish uniforms. And that was his justification for invading Poland.
Mhm.
And that strategy has been copied again and again by authoritarians. And one of the things that of recent I've seen is a number of Marines coming online and talking about do not obey unlawful orders, former Marines,
Yeah.
because they know they're going to be sent in first.
Yeah.
And they swear an oath to the Constitution, not to the ruler. And they swear an oath to obey only lawful orders. And it is going to come to that line.
Yeah.
And which is why I think creatives and those who speak out we are the pressure valve. We are the steerers. And if we give in to the violence, they've won. Marcus Aurelius said that the whole thing is never to become the enemy.
I want to just jump on that again, not jump on, to approach. So take the tension out, but to approach that with a couple of things. I am not, by the way, listeners, I am not a part of the anthology. I was not, no, I'm not a part.
In my heart and soul, he is, but okay.
I love you too, Chris. No, really. But I had been struggling with writing. I have been writing, but I've been struggling with the material that I was working on. Chris and I were republishing a play of mine and with some other things I was doing. And I had this thing with all this stuff that we're talking about that's been going on. I had this, what can I do? What should I do? Because for me, I don't want to go towards the violence. I didn't in the 60s. I don't want to do it now. It's not where my heart is. I'm definitely about resistance, but I like using this more than these. And so I kept trying to think, so finally, organically, it comes back to what do you connect to? What do you believe in? What fires you up? Who do you trust in a creative experience? And I came back to my character. He's in the 1930s too, Teel. I came back to my black soldier of fortune, Blackjack. And that's why I jumped on the 6 short stories, Chris, because
Yes.
I needed to do something. I needed to do something creatively. I needed to work in a material that would allow me to speak out, even though I wasn't quite sure what I was going to say and how I was going to say and what I was going to do. And organically, one of the things I found is just in allowing myself to conjure up some new stories, short stories, and then look back at, and this is a rule for all writers listening in, whatever ideas you have, jot them down, put them away, do not throw them out, do not judge them immediately, because they may become useful at another time.
Right.
And one of the things I did is I went back through some of my notes for old Blackjack plots, and I actually pulled out these 6. 2 of them were new, but the other 4 were based on ideas I already had. And as I began to play with arranging them in order, because I wanted to release 1 a month for the next 6 months, every single one of them had a thread that tied into what was going on now.
Yeah.
And part of that was because of when these stories were taking place in the 1930s.
Sure.
It was organic. And so suddenly the doors, like, it's not the little door open. It's like these big doors to the crypt opened. And it was all of these possibilities of things that I could do with the stories. And as I was working on them, because I'm still writing the next three, but the first three are in rough form, and one of them is out already, almost out. But as I was working on them, I did some additional research and found even more little hidden jewels that then tie into, and again, connect organically to what's happening now, but also absolutely with what was happening then. And so, Teel, history does repeat itself. The common denominator of humanity's successes and failures is the human factor.
Yeah.
We're flawed and we're blessed. We screw up and we excel. And so what's happening now is, unfortunately, yeah, it's a merry-go-round, because enough
Without
people
the
have
merry.
forgotten, and enough people have been convinced of X, enough greed has become the power core at this point, but it also is back to us to stand up
Yeah.
and to express what we feel, and to express and to tell the stories that existed before, so that they're not forgotten, as we also find voice to new stories and reflect what we're feeling now. So I think, applause to everyone who did what they did for this anthology. I think it is absolutely natural and normal that some of the stories you submitted for this anthology had been written just a few years ago, as opposed to whatever you're creating now. And I think also, in terms of Daemon, and then I'll shut up, it's not a matter of if, it's you will write. You will. It'll come out of you. And it'll come out of you maybe the way EF did with some, or it'll come out in increments when you give yourself permission to just start journaling. Just start writing, or write the musical. I'll sing.
So just
I don't want to see him in a tutu.
When the rest of the panel was helping to create this, Alex and I were recreating this, which is his play Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello. And as they were banning books and saying these things are dangerous, this is a play where Sherlock Holmes deals with a diverse cast. And that I thought was very important. That should be out there, where people might see Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello, but it may not scream diversity to them, because it comes into the play organically. Just like when we walk through the neighborhood, Steve can look around where he is right now and probably see 5, 6, 7 different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and that's our America.
Yep.
Yes, but will they still
that's
be
what
there
we're
in 4
defending
years?
collectively. That's what we're defending.
That's partly for us to affect.
Yeah.
One way or the other. Again, my mother used to say to me constantly, again, Daemon, moms, right? My moms used to say to me, they can knock us down, but as long as we keep getting up. So I'm going to keep getting up as long as I can. And that means that's a responsibility. And for those of you who have children, hey, what other kind of legacy can we leave them?
Yeah.
But the example of, you don't give up on what's right. You just don't do that. And we'll see where that takes us.
We've been at this for a while. Let's go around with final comments or something, Alex. What do you think?
Oh, I think final comments in terms of maybe a little bit, because we've talked so much about the struggle and the work and everything, like, what's ahead of you? What are you going to do? What do you want to do creatively?
Sure, I'll jump in really quick. Just, I really want to stress that I don't condone violence. So just in case that was unclear.
But you're going to gun that engine, boy.
No, I said
Here is
thought
not the
about
same.
gunning. I thought about gunning the engine. And all the point I was trying to get to is that the whole story is about realizing that the minute you do give in to that, you have become the thing that you hate. One thing I'm interested in doing is actually taking that short story and maybe expanding it into something much longer, because I think that it is such a delicate issue that I didn't, under 2,000 words, wasn't able to really explore what happens to people when they decide to commit violence, what happens to people when they commit violence together, and you're not the same.
Yeah.
You're not the same. And what do you have to even if it's not physical violence, right? If you're oppressing, right? What have you done in terms of how you think of them?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do the me versus them or the us versus them? What happens to you in those moments? And I think that was such a rich topic that I would definitely want to expand that. I think.
Yes, you're off to a hell of a start. It's a great story.
Yeah. Who else?
I'm actually working on a Western now that somebody asked me for, which is my relaxation, but I'm in the middle of the third of my Adam Paradise books, which completes the trilogy. And
Begun in
I've
Not
already
of Woman Born, right? Yep.
Not a Woman Born. The second one is A Walking Shadow, and the third one is The Undiscovered Country. But I take him to New Orleans in 39 and set him up against the Klan.
Oh,
And
I love it.
And it's a minefield, because to get everything right, even the language, is going to be a real challenge. And I've already asked somebody here to read the draft, because it's going to be a really delicate tightrope for me. And he's the outsider. He's the ultimate outsider. He's the Frankenstein's monster, but he's actually more cultured than almost anybody he meets. And dealing with the attitudes. The one thing I got to say is that I grew up in Brooklyn and in New York, and was blessed with a level of diversity that most of the country doesn't have.
Yeah.
Steve was talking about, on any given day, you could hear 4 different languages as you were walking down the street, and everybody played stickball together. And I know more Yiddish than some of my Jewish friends. And I think that, as Mark Twain said, the cure for prejudice is travel, because the more you meet people, the more you realize they're all the same. And I think that's the greatest problem our country has, is that too many of them don't travel, that they live in a bubble, and which is one of the reasons they hate the coasts, because West and East both, New York is like the symbol of the melting pot. And I was incredibly blessed to be here. And we should, because of our electronics, have spread that. And somehow it didn't happen.
We contracted.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're moving forward. There's that. And I have no idea what's coming after that.
I'm working on novel 5 of my steampunk series, and the series it features 2 very strong female characters, and as it's set in 1843, so it's not a world where women typically excel and are known for power, but it's about power. It's all about steampunk. You're dealing with steam, so you got power going, but that's the fun of it, is women finding their power and using their power against the power that's being used to oppress them. So that's where I go with what I've got.
As soon as I get out of my own way, my very first story that I ever wrote was a little novelette called Abigail, which I wrote in the prison system, observing how men in the prison system who had grown up in marginalized backgrounds were still marginalizing the gay and the trans people inside the prison system. So I took that story and set it in an alternate version of America where the population is demons, but there's still a certain amount of marginalization going on among the various demon population, benevolent demons. I'm working on, when I get out of my way, I wrote the intro to this second point, and it takes place in Florida. And I believe that some of the demons are going to be rounded up and brought into camps. And in a very fire starter way, there's going to be a coup to save some of these demons who are being rounded up by the government. And in true Abigail fashion, it's always points a finger at bigotry and homophobia and racism, and in a Twilight Zone effort, if I can. I'm inspired by everybody's words here to maybe get finally going with that again. So hopefully.
Excellent.
Anybody else?
I think we got the rest of the
Yeah.
bunch.
Let's see. So some of you may or may not know, I have, along with all my monster stuff, I have a serial killer series, Killer Genius. She kills because she cares. Killer Genius 2. Attack of the Gym Rats, and it is about a Black woman who is a socially conscious serial killer. I am about to turn the corner on finishing Killer Genius 3. And she is about to do something. And yes, it is my emotional response to what's going on in the world right now. She is about to do something that is really going to change, let's say, the complexion of the country. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay.
But it's going to be a very high body count.
I'm
Wow.
Just put it like
running
that.
around with copper tone, but I don't know. I don't know if that's
There you
where
go.
you're going with that. Yeah.
Oliver, what's going on? What's coming next for you, sir?
What's coming next? That's a good question. Definitely more poems. I have to think about, doing that. And definitely, so one of my ideas with the German kids book is I want to keep writing stories based on those characters.
Yeah. Would you
Yeah,
ever
I'll-
put them together in one collection?
That would be an idea, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Eldritch Heart is basically the title character
Yeah.
of that children's book.
It's fascinating.
Great name.
Because I don't think anybody really has done that.
No, it would be great to see.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I'm sure there's something else coming up.
Yeah.
We'll come over to your house for dinner.
Yeah. I think I'm the only one who hasn't confessed to a future. I will tell you that this is the 4th publication this year from me. So I am a little trained. Thank you. And thank you for bringing it to life and allowing me to work with you on Sherlock, the other two being collections of poetry. So I find myself drained right now, and yet I also find myself writing 1 or 2 poems a day or putting a sketch down for a story idea. We'll see where it comes from. So in the near future, I'm going to follow Glorious around because she's always an inspiration, and then keep writing these little things. And then I am blessed to be in a writer's group. I haven't been in a writer's group in a long time, and I'm in a writer's group with SVP right now. I've just put in the first 3 chapters of my last unfinished work, which is a novel called Perfect. And we're gonna see if that gets a good ass kicking, or if it works, or whatever happens.
Acknowledge one of your other publications that's become my personal favorite.
Sure.
It's been a privilege.
Yeah.
It's
been a privilege.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, we'll just say a goddess from the HWA has requested copies of that, and America, We Need to Talk. I don't know what she thinks of it, but between that and some stuff that Teel has encouraged me to do, and Alex as well, we'll see whether those things have
It will.
life in the future. That would be great. But yeah, I hope we're allowed to continue expressing ourselves in the land of the free and the home of the brave.
I will be a little bit more rebellious with that one, and I say that we will continue to do that, allowed or not, because that is our right, our privilege, our heritage. And God damn it, I'm not going to let my moms down.
No.
I agree with that. I also have to acknowledge that there is an element to this country that
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear
wants
you.
to kill that. Wants
I'm
to kill
just not
that.
ending this
Yep.
on that note.
No.
Because we've all.
Well, I think it's needed. I think we can't help ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think people need to know that's out there for people. I hope we're in service of their needs, because that was the point of all this.
Yep.
And again, I thank all of you for having the faith to contribute to that expression. And hopefully it does some good.
Okay.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you
Take
all.
care.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.